Last time I reviewed Transformers War for Cybertron, the first in a trilogy of Transformers games known as the Cybertron trilogy. And today I review game number 2, Transformers Fall of Cybertron, one of my 10 favorite games of all time. And I'll be going over sorts of things like story, gameplay, and just, random things about it. Things I like or don't like about the game. And I do want to say, if you have criticisms for the video, I would love comments about it, because I've been trying to grow this channel and I need to try to find out ways to make my videos better, and I'm a man here for constructive criticism. And I just want to say, let's get into this. But before we get into this, I have to say, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and now let's get into this. Fall of Cybertron takes place at the very end of the Cybertron War. You start the game at the end of the game. It's one of those games where you go back in the story until you reach the point of the first level you ended. At the start of the game, you play as Bumblebee. You're going through the yard while it's being destroyed. You have to eventually reach your way to Optimus and Megatron fighting. It's a little bit of a tutorial level, and then the real game starts, because you go all the way back in the past to where the Decepticons are invading the Autobots' base. After playing as Optimus, and you defend the base, you beat some Decepticons, you eventually awaken Metroplex, who helps you destroy cannons that are interfering with the Autobots and defend the base. And after a while, Optimus gets captured by Megatron. However, Metroplex comes in and smashes Megatron to pieces. After that, you switch to another level where you play as Cliffjumper and Jazz, and eventually Sideswipe, where you are investigating the disappearance of a few Autobots, including some very well-known Autobots, but we'll get to them later. And after a while of doing a bunch of objectives, you eventually find an Energon tower with tons of Energon that the Autobots desperately need, because Energon is very scarce now. After finding a tower, you go to the next chapter where you switch to Decepticon point of view, where you start playing as Vortex, who is one of my favorite Decepticons, mind you. But basically, you must destroy a bridge, and there's not much else to level. You then play Swindle, where you destroy vulnerable spots on Autobot transport carrying Energon, which is why you destroyed the bridge, to stop it from going that direction, or stop it from going over. So then, you start the chapter destroying the transport outside, bottom, tracks, whatever you call them. Then, you go to the next chapter, where you're inside the transport, and you are destroying things internally, and defeating some enemies. Then you go outside the transport, kind of do the same thing, you destroy some external stuff. Then, what happens is awesome. That's the only way I can describe it. You link up with the rest of the Combaticons, and then you form Bruticus. And what you do, you go on a rampage, destroying stuff. After a while of destroying stuff and wreaking havoc, the level ends with you destroying part of the transport. And then you switch to the next chapter, where you start as Soundwave, but it doesn't last very long. You rebuild Megatron, and then you play as Megatron. Not much to say for the Megatron section. You just fight through a bunch of enemies till you reach Starscream, or at least to fight Starscream, kind of. You kind of just beat him up, or at least Megatron does, and Starscream runs away, like he does best. And then, that next chapter, you play Starscream. Editor's note, you do not play as Starscream next chapter. You play as Megatron is still in the same chapter, and then you free Trypticon. Yeah, that's it. Where you infiltrate Shockwave's lair. You have to get in, and you try to free Grimlock, and convince him that you'll free him by making him your slave, or at least Starscream's slave. But that doesn't go too well for Starscream. And I am caught up with the manga, so don't say anything. Yeah. Jojo. Yeah. And after the cutscene, you finally play as Grimrock, where you rescue Dinobots, and you find out that all of you were experimented on, and that's why you are able to become dinosaurs, even though they've never been to Earth. But yes, some side effects, like Grimlock becoming dumber, but he's a lot stronger. So after rescuing all the Dinobots, you go through a boss battle against one of the Insecticons, and then you go up to a space bridge to destroy it, as Shockwave is enacting his nefarious plans, as he always does. And after that, you reach the final level, which is one of the coolest levels, and probably one of my favorite levels in video game history, where you start the battle of the Autobots and Decepticons. First you play as Soundwave, sorry, and you do some little missions. Then you play as Air Raid, you do some more missions, and you kind of just switch back and forth. It's really cool. You can play as Bruticus again, and you actually get to fight Bruticus as Jazz, and you kind of defeat Bruticus, and then after a while, you eventually get back to Optimus and Megatron fighting, and you actually get to choose who you want to play as. You can play as Megatron, or you can play as Optimus. Depending on who you choose, you fight the other. Nothing changes with the story, really. The only difference is who gets stabbed at the very end. And then you go to like this black hole or something, white hole. I'm not exactly sure what happens at the very end. I'm guessing there is supposed to be a sequel that says what happened, but that sequel never came to be. And there's not much else to the story, so let's move on. The gameplay is pretty similar to the rest of the games. It's a third-person shooter, and you shoot enemies, fight bosses, and destroy objects. There is still transforming, obviously, and in your vehicle mode, you still have boost mode and combat mode. However, there are changes I want to talk about. First of all, the biggest thing that changed was the removal of classes for story mode characters, and that doesn't seem like too big of a deal, but it changes a lot. Most characters now have their own unique abilities. There are some repeaters, but for the most part, they are pretty unique. I will mention there are still classes in online multiplayer, but not in story mode, which helps a lot because it makes every character a lot more unique. And another good thing is the addition of weapons. There were only like 2 or 3 added for robot mode. However, vehicle modes now have 2 weapons for each character, heavy and light, which will help with not running out of ammo for your weapons when doing campaign. And it won't cause you to get soft locked by flying enemies after a while, because you can't move on without defeating them. Yes, that happened to me in War of Cybertron. It was very annoying because I had to sit there and wait for my teammates to try to kill them. They kept missing. But now, there's not much of a problem because ammo is also a lot better now. And another big change was there is now one big campaign instead of 2 Autobot and Decepticon campaigns. So now the campaigns aren't 2 separate. They're one campaign where you go through as Autobot Decepticons, leading into one big story. And it's all chronological, which is very nice. I don't have too much else to say for the gameplay, so we'll move on to things I liked and disliked. Not much to say over that section. Let's go. So, positives and negatives. I don't really have a big negative for the game. My only real negative is that it's not as hard as War for Cybertron, but depending on how you take it, that can also be a positive, because maybe some people want the game to be a bit easier. Think about game journalists here. But yeah, I don't really have a big complaint or a big negative. Like, it is obviously not perfect, but that's only because, you know, you can only go so far in certain games. Even if you perfect everything in the game, you can't make a perfect game. Now, positives. First of all, I love the fact that you don't have to choose between characters in each chapter. I know it's not like major for some people. Some people might like it, in fact. But I just didn't like choosing between 3 characters. I want to have one character that I can play as and not have to choose between. It just makes it easier because I'm a person that has difficulty choosing. Another thing is how the Dinobots are handled in this game. You get an explanation for why they are able to become dinosaurs, even though they've never been to Earth and they know about it. It's because there's an archive of tons of planets and creatures on those planets, so obviously you had dinosaurs. And so they were put into the Dinobot modes. They were experimented on by Shockwaves. And with the experiments comes positive, like I mentioned earlier. Grimlock became dumber, but he became far stronger. And I just think that's such a cool way to explain the characters and how they became Dinobots in this movie. And another big critique, or big, not critique, positive for the game, is that it is far more colorful. It reminds me a lot more of the G1 movies than the Michael Bay movies, which I like a lot because I may be like kind of nostalgic for the Michael Bay movies since I grew up with them as a kid. I also grew up with the G1 show, and I fairly love the aesthetic of the bright and colorfulness more than I love the aesthetic of the darkness. And the biggest thing that I love so much is the fact that you switch characters during chapters. While it might not like seem too big, it leads a level of surprise. Like, the chapter could say you're playing as Soundwave. You play as him for half the chapter, but then you play as, I don't know, Starscream. That doesn't have the game, but it's an example. It just leaves it so like, oh my god, I didn't know this character was playable in story mode. That's really cool. So it just adds a level of surprise into the game when you've never played it before. And I don't have much else to say for positives and negatives, so let's kind of wrap this up. In the end, this is just a good game. The gameplay is extremely fun, and even if you're not a shooter fan, it still can be fun. And all the levels are nicely paced. You don't feel like you're playing a chapter that's too long. I just can't recommend this game more. I can go over so much stuff about this game that I just can't even summarize in a video. And even for people who aren't Transformers fans, this game is extremely fun. I know a couple people, they don't like Transformers that much, but they love this game. All I can say is just play this game. If you're not a fan, you'll still have fun. I just want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's one more video on the Cybertron series that's left. After that, I will be moving on to other games. I do have plans for the games and footage for other games. And yeah, I don't have much else to say other than thank you for watching and tune in next time. Bye-bye.